Welcome back to our emotional elasticity course. Today we're going to cover managing stress and anxiety. So we really need to look at what stress is, right? Stress is not necessarily a bad thing. There's really stress and distress. So stress, what is stress? Stress is something we need in order to function, right? It's something that helps us keep focus, keep our eye on the prize. It may be that we have a certain amount of stress because we need to pay our bills, right? So we have to have this job. So we have focus on completing tasks at work. It may be that stress helps us reach for goals, that our kid's birthday is coming up in a month and we have a contest going on at work for a free vacation. So if I win this vacation, if I go above and beyond everybody else, that I'll be able to go ahead and take my kid on this awesome vacation. So it may be that the stress involved is helping me reach for that goal. It also could be that stress is helping me protect myself. It could be that when I see someone walking towards me with a metal object in their hand at night, I get a little stressed out and start thinking, what am I going to do if this person swings? Am I going to go ahead and close the distance so that way the weapon doesn't actually hit me? Am I going to take off running? All of a sudden, it's actually protecting me, having that stress. And then if I ever encounter a situation in the future like that, I'm also prepared and it helps protect me then as well. But what is distress? Distress is when we're under stress for too long. Stress, once again, can be useful. It can be positive. It can be healthy. It can help us accomplish great things. But when we're under the same stress too long, that's when it creates distress. And what does distress lead to? It leads to feeling overwhelmed, which allows for us to be easily distracted because we feel like we'll never accomplish the goals that are put in front of us, right? It's easy for us to lose motivation because we feel like no matter what we do, we'll never actually be successful. And then finally, it can actually lead to sickness. Once again, we talked about in the beginning of this course how important it is to have good emotional health because it can actually lead to sickness and death. And we really need to make sure that we manage our stress and don't get into distress. Now, what is at the core of stress? It's pretty simple. It's tasks. Now, when it comes to tasks, we need to go ahead and figure out our tasks each and every day when we wake up, right? We need to get up and we need to list everything that needs to be done, right? Whether it be doing the dishes, whether it be hitting a sales goal, whether it be taking the kids to school, we need to write down every single task that needs to be done. And maybe things in the future, right? That you need to hit so many sales in order to win that contest, right? So you can take the kid on vacation. But you need to write down that entire list. And then you need to go ahead and categorize 3 separate sections, right? Those sections should be what must get done, what should get done, and what I would like to get done. And then within each section, you need to prioritize every task that you did. What 100% needs to get done? Need to feed my kids today. Boom. Number 1 task, right? That's pretty huge. And then number 2 task, feed myself, right? Then the next task is actually getting them to school or getting yourself to work, right? All of a sudden, you have to prioritize everything. Why? Because once you accomplish everything that must get done, then you need to know where to start on what should get done. You need to have everything kind of lined up in advance. That way it's a smooth transition and helps reduce stress. And you can also then reflect on all the positive things you got done that day because we often like to look at what we don't accomplish, right? We get negative because we create our own stress, especially successful people. Most people would be surprised to know that the people who suffer the most from depression and overbearing stress is actually business owners, CEOs. And why is that? It's pretty simple. Stress, once again, can be a good thing. It's a great motivator. And of course, people that put a lot of stress on themselves normally are extremely successful. But it's also easier then to then go ahead and become in distress. And once you become in distress, that's when you can actually get into depression. So now that we recognize that with this task, we really need to look at what we're dealing with when it comes to different stress levels. So as you can see with this chart, we have several different levels of stress. The first is the green level, and that's the best level. That's where we're confident. That's where we're ready to meet challenges. And of course, in that level, that's where we desire to be on a daily basis. Because in the green level, we're able to keep going. We're able to handle the stress of everyday life with family, with work, with progressing in a healthy way. But oftentimes we'll get into the yellow level, right? And that's where we get tense, we get concerned, we get worried. Sometimes we're a little insecure. And it's normal for us to get in these levels because that's where challenges take place. That's where growth happens. And we need to be challenged. We need to have things that make us aspire to be better. So we need to go into the yellow section of stress, but we can't stay there all the time. Because when we do, what ends up happening, then we fall into the orange level. And that's when we start to get exhausted physically and emotionally. That's when we're overwhelmed, right? That's when we get sick to our stomach. We get discouraged. And that's a bad place. That's where we start falling towards depression. And we start engaging in a lot of crazy activities. Maybe we start to become alcoholics, or we start to lean on crutches to try and help us get through situations. And that can just get worse and worse and snowball into bad situations. And then, of course, the orange level will get us to red, where we feel constantly overwhelmed. That's where we really start to get into depression. We feel hopeless, and we start to look for help. We need help from others because we feel like we can't do it on our own, that no matter what, we won't be successful. And we need to recognize when we're in these different stress levels, because when we're in these different stress levels, then we can go ahead and start dealing with things appropriately. And that's what leads us to being mindful of stress. And let's take a look at how we're going to be mindful of stress. We need to pay attention to our body. Are you starting to feel sick? Are you eating more or less than usual? We need to pay attention to our body. Are you starting to feel sick? Are your energy levels extremely low? Are you eating more? Are you eating less? Is there anything out of whack? You also need to pay attention to what's happening mentally. Are you starting to get brain fog, where you get confused by things? Are you easily distracted because you feel overwhelmed? Anytime these things are occurring, that means you're already in the orange zone. And you need to make sure that you don't continue to go down that path into the red zone. So how do we stop that? How do we get going back on the right path? Well, we need to go ahead and refocus. We need to focus on our goals. We need to focus on what would make us happy if we were able to achieve, if we were able to complete this task or complete that. Obviously, we're going to have a ton of things going on, whether it be at work or at home. So we need to focus on what it is that we see as, when I do this, man, it's going to be awesome. Focus on that. That's going to be a driving factor. It's going to be a motivator. It's going to help you shake off the feelings of being overwhelmed, the feelings that nothing matters. It's going to help you get back on the path. And then you can go back and revisit your accomplishments, right? You created these lists, these daily lists of must-dos, of should-dos, of what you would like to do. And all of a sudden now you can go back to those lists and you can see all these accomplishments that you've done. So you know that you aren't worthless, that you know everything you're doing has meaning, that you are progressing, that you're moving forward, you're not stuck. And when you revisit those accomplishments, now all of a sudden you can get back to moving forward. But when we start moving back forward, there's one more pitfall we got to watch out for, and that's perfectionism. And what is perfectionism? Perfectionism is a pitfall. It stops us from moving forward. It creeps up in our thoughts that whatever we did just wasn't good enough. It wasn't perfect. It could have been better. So we stay put on that and we continue to redo that task until we can make it perfect. But almost nothing in life is perfect. So we get stuck there and all the momentum we had moving forward stops. We have to acknowledge that in life we make mistakes. We learn from it. We progress and then we continue to move forward. Then we can go ahead and move on to the next task. We can go ahead and reach for the next goal. We can move forward in life. And that's what we need to focus on. That's how we're going to overcome stress and anxiety. That's how we're going to manage it. We're going to understand the difference between stress and distress. We're going to go ahead and acknowledge the different levels of stress. And when we see ourselves going into the orange or the red levels, we need to be mindful of it. And we need to go ahead and start putting the right measures into place. And when we do that and we start heading on the right path, guess what? We need to make sure we don't stop that by having perfectionism come into play. Because if we do, then we end up stuck in the mud. And that is how we're going to get on the right path. But if we don't do those things, what ends up happening is we become sad and we become depressed. And then it becomes really difficult to get out of those situations. And that's what we're going to cover next week. I'll see you next week.